He who has everything lives in constant captivity of fear. Alish. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. The night was calm, but inside the mansion, silence was heavy, not peaceful. A man in a dark suit stood near the window, looking out at the garden. The light shimmered on the water, the trees swayed gently, but his heart was not there. Behind the expensive glass, behind the perfect smile he wore all day, there was an ache no one saw. He had everything people dream of: cars, houses, watches, invitations to the finest events. But each evening, when the world quieted, another truth whispered to him. It was the sound of fear, not the fear of poverty, but the fear of loss. The fear of the moment when all that glitter would vanish, when the applause would fade, when the phone would stop ringing. We imagine the rich as untouchable, floating above the world's troubles. But they know another pain, a secret pain. They live in a fortress, but the walls are made of glass. One stone, one scandal, one betrayal, and everything they built shatters. The world outside looks at the glow, but inside, shadows dance. The man pours himself a drink. His hands are steady, trained to hide the storm inside, but his mind races. Market changes, rivals plotting, friends turning cold, family asking, always asking. The price of success is never paid just once. It demands payment every day, every night, until sleep feels like surrender. There's a paradox here. Wealth is supposed to bring freedom, but often it builds a cage. The bars are invisible but unbreakable. The need to be seen, to be admired, to stay on top. And with every step higher, the ground below feels thinner. One wrong move, and the fall is long. People chase wealth thinking it will silence their fears, but money doesn't erase fear, it transforms it. Fear of hunger becomes fear of theft. Fear of loneliness becomes fear of betrayal. Fear of obscurity becomes fear of downfall. The costume changes, but the actor remains. In the corner of the room, a mirror reflects his face. Sharp lines, tired eyes, a jaw set not in peace but in armor. He knows the truth. Nothing he owns can protect him from himself. Behind the empire, behind the victories, there is a boy who wanted to prove something. Now he has everything, but the voice inside still whispers, not enough. As he walks through the silent halls, past paintings and statues, past trophies and signed letters, he feels the weight of it all, not as a crown, but as chains. And in that moment, standing alone among riches, a quiet realization comes. The thing he fears most is not losing what he has, but losing who he is. Because what seems like triumph from the outside often feels like a prison from within. And that is the hidden cost of wealth, a cost counted not in dollars, but in sleepless nights. The night fades into morning, but the fear stays. A man wakes up in silk sheets, the sun warming the marble floor, the smell of fresh coffee drifting through the house. But even before his eyes fully open, his mind is already racing. The day hasn't begun, yet the battle has. Meetings, calls, deals, appearances, and under it all, the tension of keeping it together. He steps into the shower, water falling like rain, but it doesn't wash away the tightness in his chest. For years he told himself that once he reached a certain point, a certain number in the account, a certain house, a certain car, he would relax. But every time he crossed that line, a new line appeared. The horizon kept moving, and he kept running. Fear of loss is not loud. It's quiet, a whisper at the edge of every moment. When he laughs, it's there. When he raises a glass in celebration, it's there. When the deal is signed, when the audience cheers, when the crowd chants his name, it's there, waiting in the corner, smiling softly. The more he has, the more there is to lose. He remembers the early days when all he wanted was to break through, to prove his worth. Back then, the hunger drove him. But now, the hunger has changed shape. It's no longer about gaining. It's about defending. He builds walls around his empire, adds layers of protection, but the enemy is already inside. The enemy is the part of him that can't stop calculating, can't stop watching, can't stop fearing. He sees it in the people around him too. The actor whose face is known worldwide but panics at the thought of fading fame. The entrepreneur whose name is on magazines but wakes up at night sweating over market shifts. The heir who grew up with everything but feels like a fraud inside. They all wear the same mask. The mask says, "I'm in control," but beneath it the eyes dart, the heart races. The irony is sharp. From the outside they look like they've conquered life. From the inside, they know they're one step away from collapse. And that collapse doesn't always come from failure. Sometimes it comes from success. Success expands the field of battle. The stakes grow, and suddenly, the cost of every decision rises. There's a moment, late at night, when the house is still, and he walks alone through the halls. The paintings stare back, the statues stand frozen. He wonders if they see through him, if they know. He passes the rooms filled with awards, the shelves heavy with trophies, the closets lined with tailored suits, and in that silence, a thought slips in. None of this will matter if it all disappears. He remembers his father, a man who worked himself to the bone, always chasing, always pushing. He remembers the look in his father's eyes, a mix of pride and exhaustion, the way he clutched his successes like fragile glass. Now he sees the same reflection in himself, and he wonders if this is the legacy he's building, not wealth, but fear dressed in gold. The world outside moves fast. Markets rise and fall, alliances shift. The public's love turns to indifference. He knows this. He studies it. He tries to stay ahead, to predict, to maneuver, but the truth is, control is an illusion. A fragile net stretched over chaos, and the tighter he pulls, the more it cuts into his hands. He remembers the first time he tasted victory, the rush, the thrill, the electric charge. But that was long ago. Now, victory feels heavy, like carrying a weight uphill. With each new triumph, the joy shrinks, the pressure grows. Because now, it's not just about winning, it's about not losing. And that shift changes everything. There are moments when he wonders what it would feel like to let go, to walk away, to stop running. But the thought vanishes as quickly as it comes, because beneath the layers of success, there's a wound that success never healed. A wound that says, "You are only as good as your last victory." And that voice never sleeps. The people around him play their parts. Some praise him, some envy him, some plot against him. He's learned to read faces, to hear the undercurrent beneath the words. But what he can't escape is the simple truth that no one sees. The fear isn't of others taking his crown. The fear is of realizing that the crown was never real. He sits in his office, overlooking the city. Lights blink in the distance. Cars move like rivers of fire. He wonders how many others sit in towers like this, wondering the same thing. He wonders if anyone tells the truth. If anyone admits that wealth comes with a shadow, that every dollar is a double-edged sword, that behind every smile, there's a calculation. He closes his eyes and takes a breath. For a moment, there's quiet, but then the mind starts again. The numbers, the plans, the moves, the defense. It's a rhythm he knows too well. And as the sun sets behind the skyline, casting long shadows across his desk, he feels the weight of the day settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, not as a punishment, but as a companion. The companion he never invited but can never send away. The day ends as it began, with the quiet echo of fear. And as he moves through his home, surrounded by everything he once dreamed of, he knows the truth. The price of keeping it all is never fully paid. It is a debt that renews itself each dawn, each dusk, each breath. Morning turns into afternoon, but the rhythm remains the same. Behind polished doors and velvet curtains, the battle for control rages on. Meetings flow one into another, contracts signed, hands shaken, smiles exchanged. Yet under the surface, there is no stillness. The man sits at the head of the table, nodding, speaking, leading. But inside, a storm brews, quiet but relentless. Control. This is the word that defines his days. Not just control over money, but over people, outcomes, narratives, perception. Every gesture, every word, every glance is measured. Every move is part of a dance, and every dancer knows the price of a wrong step. Control promises safety, but the tighter he grips, the more the world resists. He learned long ago that wealth does not just open doors, it creates mirrors. Mirrors in which he constantly checks himself, mirrors held up by others, reflecting not who he is, but who they want him to be. And behind each mirror waits a question he no longer dares to ask. When did he stop being the author of his own story? The illusion of control is seductive. He tells himself that he can manage it all, the business, the family, the reputation, that with enough attention, enough planning, he can shape the world around him. But life slips through fingers like sand. Deals fall through, markets shift, people change. And beneath the polished surface, the foundation trembles. He watches those around him, the partners, the rivals, the advisors. They all speak of power, but their eyes tell another story. They speak of strategy, but their hands shake when they think no one is watching. They gather around tables heavy with wealth, but their hearts race, their minds run, their nights are restless. Because they too are caught in the same game, a game without a finish line. He remembers a friend from the early days, a man who rose fast and fell faster. The headlines were brutal, the world moved on, and now the friend lives in quiet exile, a name half forgotten. That memory haunts him, not because of the fall, but because of the speed with which the world forgets. Fame fades, success evaporates, influence dissolves, and those who once bowed their heads now turn away without a second glance. The empire he built stands tall, but he knows its fragility, not because it lacks strength, but because strength itself is fragile when it depends on things that change. The market does not care for loyalty. The public does not care for yesterday's hero. Even family ties fray when stretched by ambition, resentment, unmet needs. He has seen it in his own life. The silent dinners, the missed birthdays, the conversations that feel like negotiations. The people closest to him are both allies and strangers. They orbit around him caught in the glow, but he feels the distance widen. Love becomes currency, presence becomes performance, and somewhere along the way he wonders, did he trade connection for conquest? The cost of control is not measured in money. It is measured in moments lost, in relationships strained, in the quiet erosion of self. The man at the top is often the loneliest, not because others left, but because he no longer knows how to meet them, without the armor, without the role, without the control. At night, he stands at the edge of his property, the city stretching beyond. Lights flicker, cars hum, voices drift through the air. He wonders how many people live without this weight, how many laugh without calculation, speak without agenda, love without caution. The thought stings, not with regret, but with longing. He remembers the first time he felt the hunger for more. It was not about greed, it was about proving something, escaping something, becoming someone. And for a while, it worked. The victories piled up, the world opened its arms. But with each step higher, the ground below felt more distant. And now, from this height, he sees it clearly. Control is not freedom. It is a leash disguised as a crown. He walks back inside, the walls cool to the touch. The house is beautiful, but it feels like a museum. Rooms filled with objects, each with a story, but none of them alive. He moves through the space, noticing the details he once loved, the art, the design, the rare collections. But tonight, they feel hollow, not because they lack value, but because value without meaning is just noise. As he prepares for bed, he catches his reflection again, the same face the world admires, the same figure they follow. But behind the eyes, he sees the truth. The man who built the empire has become its prisoner, not because he was weak, but because he believed control would save him. And now, he carries the burden of that belief. Lying in bed, the ceiling above him stretches wide and empty. His mind drifts, not to deals or deadlines, but to a simpler time. A memory of laughter without tension, of days without plans, of moments unmeasured. The memory is faint, but it stirs something in him, too. A reminder that beyond control, beyond success, there was once a person who simply lived. The night deepens, the city quiets, but inside, the rhythm continues. The mind calculates, the heart braces, the body prepares for another day. And yet, in the dark, a small voice rises. A voice that says perhaps, just perhaps, letting go might bring a freedom control never could. The night passes and dawn spills over the city, soft light creeping into the edges of his room. The man rises before the alarm as always. Sleep is light, never deep, a thin veil barely covering the restless mind. He moves through the morning ritual without thought. The tailored suit, the polished shoes, the perfect tie. Each gesture rehearsed, each movement sharp. From the outside, it looks like discipline. From the inside, it feels like survival. As he steps outside, the air is crisp, the world waking up. The driver waits. The car door opens. The city stretches ahead. But even here, in this small moment, there's no peace. His eyes scan the phone, the updates, the messages. Each word carries weight. A shift in the market, a change in a deal, a whisper of trouble, and the chain reaction begins. He arrives at the office, the building tall and gleaming, a monument to his rise. Inside, the corridors buzz with movement, voices, decisions. People turn as he passes, eyes sharp, back straight. His presence shapes the air, sets the tone. But beneath the surface, they know, and he knows. This is a stage, and everyone is performing. The higher he climbs, the fewer genuine moments remain. Conversations are layered, words chosen with care, smiles balanced between warmth and strategy. The people around him orbit like moons, pulled by his gravity but never touching. Friendship becomes rare, trust becomes currency, and in this climate, loneliness blooms not in empty rooms, but in crowded ones. He thinks of the people he once called friends, the ones from the early days. Some fell away, lost in the gaps between ambition and loyalty. Some stayed, but their presence turned brittle, shaped by the demands of the new world. And some drifted into silence, unable to keep pace with the speed of his ascent. At first, he mourned these losses. Then he learned to numb them. The man moves through the day, voice steady, hand firm, decision swift. But inside, a quieter voice speaks. The voice of doubt, of memory, of questions buried under years of noise. What did he trade for this life? What corners of himself did he abandon to stand here? The questions linger like shadows, following him from room to room. He steps into a meeting, the air thick with tension. Numbers flash on screens, graphs rise and fall, voices argue softly. He knows how to read the room, how to steer the moment, how to win. And yet, as he speaks, a part of him stands apart, watching the dance, the roles, the masks, watching himself play a part so long worn it has become skin. There's a paradox in power. The stronger the position, the greater the isolation. Influence builds walls. Wealth sharpens suspicion. Success redraws the map of human connection. He remembers a moment not long ago. A celebration, a toast, a room filled with laughter. And yet, standing at the center, he felt an emptiness so profound it silenced the noise. The world loves a winner, but it watches closely, waiting for the slip, the stumble, the fall. He has seen it happen to others, the ones who forgot, who relaxed, who let down their guard. One mistake, one misstep, and the same crowd that cheered turns away. Reputation is a fragile thing, easily built, easily broken, and he knows, better than most, that survival depends on vigilance. At night, when the house quiets, he sometimes walks through the halls with no destination. He touches the cool surfaces, the familiar shapes, the polished edges. He looks at the art collected over decades, the objects chosen carefully, the spaces crafted for beauty and status. But tonight, as on many nights, they feel like echoes of a life performed, not lived. He thinks of the young man he once was, full of fire, of hunger, of dreams. That young man imagined a life of freedom, of choice, of self-made meaning. And yet, as the years unfolded, freedom narrowed, choice hardened into responsibility, meaning twisted into achievement. Somewhere along the road, the chase replaced the destination. Outside, the city hums. Cars flicker past. Lives unfold in apartments, on sidewalks, in hidden corners. He wonders how many walk these streets without the weight he carries. How many laugh without calculation, love without defense, speak without layers. The thought lands heavy, not as envy, but as ache, a quiet longing for something forgotten. In rare moments, he allows himself to imagine another life, not of poverty, not of failure, but of simplicity. A life where success is measured not by numbers, but by presence. Where connection replaces performance, where being replaces doing. But these thoughts are fleeting, easily dismissed, quickly buried beneath the next task, the next demand. The night deepens, and he sits alone in a room lined with windows. The city stretches beyond, vast and indifferent. He watches the lights flicker, the traffic flow, the patterns of movement. And in this moment, the loneliness sharpens, not as sadness, not as regret, but as simple fact. To stand at the peak is to stand apart. To hold power is to hold distance. He closes his eyes, takes a breath, lets the silence settle. For a heartbeat, the noise inside quiets. But then the mind stirs again, the wheel turns, the rhythm resumes. There is no pause, no off switch, no exit. Only the steady pulse of the life he built, the life that now holds him in its grasp. As the night surrenders to morning, he rises once more. The ritual begins again, the suit, the shoes, the schedule, the mask. And as he steps into the light of the new day, the truth remains. The greater the height, the deeper the shadow. And in that shadow lives the part of him that remembers, the part of him that waits. The morning air tastes cold as he steps out, a sharp contrast to the warmth of polished rooms and soft leather seats. The streets come alive. The world moves fast, but he walks through it untouched, separate, watching it all like a spectator behind glass. This is the price of the hunt. This is the world of the predator, the one who never stops, never rests, never allows himself to fall behind. The archetype of the hunter runs deep in him, the one who seeks, who chases, who takes. It has been with him since the beginning. The restless drive, the hunger that no victory can satisfy. He wears it like a second skin, invisible but undeniable. And yet, in the quiet hours, another truth presses close. The hunter has become the hunted. Ambition sharpens the senses but dulls the soul. What began as a race forward has twisted into a race away, away from failure, from fear, from the voice that asks what all this is really for. The more he gains, the faster he runs. Not toward something, but away. Because in the silence, the old fears wake up. The fear of irrelevance, the fear of fading, the fear that without the chase, there is no him. He remembers the deals, the negotiations, the brilliant wins that built his reputation. Each one fed the myth, the story told in boardrooms, on magazine covers, at dinner tables. But myths come with a hidden cost. They demand you become their keeper, their protector. You stop being a person and become a symbol, and symbols are heavy to carry. Around him, others play the same game. The faces change, but the pattern repeats. The young executive desperate to prove himself, burning the candle at both ends. The seasoned veteran clinging to relevance, unwilling to step aside. The rival who masks envy behind charm, waiting for the stumble that will open the door. They circle each other, smile in public, strike in private. The game is old, but it never softens. He knows the rules, plays them well, but the rules have shaped him into something he no longer fully recognizes. Once the winds filled him with light. Now they land with the dull thud of expectation met, obligation fulfilled. The thrill has faded, replaced by the constant pressure to sustain, to maintain, to defend. The paradox deepens. With every layer of success, the ground beneath grows thinner. There is no safe point, no summit where the burden lifts. The higher he climbs, the more exposed he becomes. Eyes watch, hands reach, knives sharpen. Not all enemies stand across the table. Some walk beside him, laugh with him, shake his hand. He knows this. He accepts it, and it hardens him. There's a loneliness in power that few admit. The loneliness of being seen, but not known. The loneliness of questioning every gesture, every offer of friendship, every word of praise. When does admiration turn to calculation? When does loyalty become leverage? When does love curdle into need? These are not questions he voices, but they live in his chest, a quiet weight he carries. He remembers a night not long ago standing on a balcony above the city, a glass in hand, surrounded by laughter. And in that moment a sudden, piercing thought. None of this feels real. The faces, the words, the applause, they drift like smoke. What remains when the lights go out and the room's empty? What remains when the crowd moves on? The hunter becomes the hunted, not by rivals or markets, but by his own reflection. The man in the mirror, the voice in the dark, the ache in the chest. This is the silent pursuit, the quiet chase. Not after money, not after power, but after meaning. And meaning proves the most elusive prize of all. He watches others fall. He sees the signs. The restless energy that turns reckless. The hunger that slides into addiction. The drive that devours everything in its path. Some burn out in public, some in private. Some disappear without a sound. He wonders when his turn will come, or if it already has, and he simply refuses to see it. There's a memory he cannot shake. A conversation years ago with a mentor, a man long gone. They sat late into the night. The older man quiet, thoughtful. At one point he said, "Be careful not to become the mask you wear." At the time he laughed, young and invincible. Now those words echo. Now they sting. Inside the empire, the machines hum, the teams work, the projects unfold. The surface gleams, the engine roars. But beneath it all, a question trembles. Who am I without this? Without the meetings, the victories, the battles, without the endless forward motion? The question circles him, patient, unhurried. And though he outruns it by day, it waits for him at night. There's no finish line in this race. Only the moment when the body slows, the mind stumbles, the edge dulls. And in that moment, the chase reveals itself for what it is. Not a journey to freedom, but a loop without end. The hunter who becomes the hunted, the winner who fears the fall, the leader who dreads the silence. He walks alone through the corridors, the weight of years pressing against his shoulders. He touches the cool walls, the marble floors, the symbols of his triumph. And he feels, as he has felt so often, the strange ache of a life both full and empty. Full of achievement, empty of rest. Full of movement, empty of arrival. Outside, the city glows, restless, alive. He watches from his window, the streets pulsing, the world turning. He wonders how many out there carry this same ache, this same hunger wrapped in gold. And for a moment, just a moment, he allows himself to imagine stepping off the wheel, slipping out of the hunt, leaving the mask behind. But then the phone buzzes, the next demand rises, the next move waits. And with a breath, he straightens his shoulders, steadies his mind, steps back into the current. The chase calls, and he answers, because this is the life he built, the life that built him. And in this dance of hunter and hunted, there is no pause. The night deepens, the stars flicker, the city hums, and in the stillness of his room, he stands at the window, the weight of it all in his chest. He knows the truth, even if he rarely speaks it. The greatest hunt is not for power, not for wealth, but for peace. And that is the one prize that keeps slipping through his hands. The night is long, but morning always comes. The city stretches awake. The sky softens to pale gold. The first sounds drift up from the streets below. In the quiet of his room, he sits still, hands resting on his knees, eyes open but unfocused. There is no rush now, no urgent message, no call demanding his voice. For the first time in a long time, the silence feels like an invitation, not a threat. He walks slowly through the house, bare feet on cold stone, the hush of the early hour wrapping around him. The walls hold stories, the objects mark victories, but this morning they seem to fade. He lingers at the window, watching the city move, watching the world continue without his hand on the wheel. And as he watches, a realization sharpens. Everything he built was meant to protect him, but nothing has ever truly made him safe. The mind, so sharp in business, begins to soften in these early moments. He remembers laughter, real laughter, before the mask. He remembers nights under open skies, before ceilings grew higher and walls grew thicker. He remembers a time when his worth was not measured in numbers or headlines, when he could rest without fearing what the world might take. These memories sting, but they also soothe. They remind him that another life is possible. Power, wealth, influence. They had promised freedom, but they delivered a different kind of chain. The freedom to choose became the duty to maintain. The influence to shape became the burden to defend. And somewhere in this maze, he lost sight of the simplest truth. To live is not to conquer, but to connect. Not to own, but to be. He steps outside, the air crisp on his skin, the garden still damp with dew. The trees stand quiet, unhurried, the flowers open without audience. For a moment, he feels small, and in that smallness, he feels something like relief. The world does not need him to hold it up. The sun rises without his command. The seasons turn without his approval. Life moves, and perhaps the greatest strength is learning to move with it, not against it. The people he once envied now seem less like winners and more like mirrors. The rivals he fought, the mentors he chased, the idols he placed on pedestals, they all carried the same weight, the same hunger, the same restless heart, and many of them, he sees now, were not ahead of him, but alongside him, running the same race, chasing the same shadow. He thinks of the word surrender. For years, it tasted like failure, like weakness, but now it feels different. Surrender is not collapse. Surrender is release. It is the moment when the hands open, when the armor falls away, when the heart softens. It is the shift from holding on to letting go. And maybe, Just maybe, in that letting go, there's the first taste of real freedom. Inside the house, the phone rings. The day begins. But today, he lingers a little longer. Today, he lets the sun warm his skin, lets the wind brush his face, lets the noise of the world come without rushing to meet it. Today, he feels the pull of life not as a battle, but as a song. Soft, quiet, waiting. The journey to this point was long. It carved lines into his face. It weighed on his shoulders. It shaped the man he became. But now, standing at this edge, he senses a different path. Not forward, not higher, not faster, but inward. Deeper, quieter. Toward the part of himself that was always waiting, always watching, always hoping to be remembered. He turns from the window, moves through the house, feels the ground beneath his feet. For the first time, the silence inside feels like home, not like a cage. And in that silence, he hears the most unexpected sound. His own breath, steady and unforced. His own heartbeat, calm and sure. And somewhere deep within, a soft voice, whispering not of fear, but of peace. The man who once chased the world now stands still, and in that stillness, he discovers a truth money cannot buy, power cannot command, success cannot guarantee. The truth that the richest life is not the one with the most trophies, but the one with the fewest regrets. Not the life that conquers, but the life that belongs. As the sun climbs, as the city wakes, as the day stretches open, he smiles. Not for the cameras, not for the crowd, not for the mirror, but for himself. And in that small, quiet smile, there is a kind of victory no one can see, no one can measure, no one can take away. A victory not over the world, but over the fear that once ruled his life. And so the man steps into his day, no longer the hunter, no longer the hunted, but simply a man, walking, breathing, alive, and in that moment, at last, free. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.